Okay, I thought it's time to invite to our conversation people who not only inspired me to become framing facilitator, but also people who know what I'm talking about. Okay, so in Wilson Beast Consulting, we work with leaders, especially project managers, and help them build strong projects, teams, and organizations. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I've got absolute pleasure and honor to introduce you the one and only Neil Maxfield. Right, I know Neil for about probably 8 years, and let me just give you a bit of an insight about what I know already about Neil. So I know him for 8 years, but Neil has got over 45 years of experiences in project development and project management. He worked on projects in all phases of project lifecycle, in brownfields and greenfields, and his focus was mainly in construction, quality assurance, quality control, project development, delivery, and also he was involved in project reviews and gate reviews. And I know at some point he was also managing a group of facilitators. So Neil is someone really special who managed to network really well across the company and has been a coach and mentor to many people, including myself. Neil, so how are you doing today?
Oh, in a word, Fiona, I'm bonza.
I knew you were going to say that.
And for those who don't really understand that word, it means that I'm as good as I can be. I've woken up today. It's another day in paradise, and I can't wait to see what it'll bring.
All right. So where are you right now, Neil?
I'm over in Melbourne, Victoria. I'm spending some time post full-time work, managing my well-being, thinking through the transition from full-time work into semi-retirement, part-time activity, and having the pleasure of looking after an elderly mother at the same time. So quite special, really.
Okay, so let's just get into asking you some questions that I think a lot of project managers, a lot of emerging project managers might be interested in. All right, so Neil, well, give us a little bit of insights. What kind of projects you worked on?
The projects are varied all the way through from very simple replacement, brownfield construction projects that have a blend of working out what has to be done, stepping back, planning, and then implementing, all the way through to being part of mega projects where you are clearly part of a team much larger than yourself that can only ever survive through the combined efforts of a broad team and then sub-teams and subgroups within that, where we have worked from the business need, the opportunity statement, the idea, where we have had a need to take some action to realise a next step in a value chain, for example, for a very long dated project that might last 30, 40 years for delivering energy products, for example. And I've been privileged to work in all facets of that, from those early investigations, I would argue, that those very earliest times where you really start to understand what I've got, place that against where I'd like to be, and look at the options on how you get there. And sometimes that can be many, many studies that are undertaken, many smaller decisions that are made, hopefully at the right time with the right quality of data and information, with the right understanding and the right context of where we want to go and where we are today. And in amongst all of that, being able to lead teams doing the engineering, doing the early design work, doing the ideation, undertaking those studies all the way through to handing over to startup through the commissioning phase and into startup and post-startup support. So very privileged to work through many, many small projects and a handful of mega projects where the start is a very bold, audacious, almost aspiration, and then to bring that to life through being part of a team, both through being a team member and also being a leader.
Right. So which phase would be your favorite? Have you got any favorite phase? Would it be at the start, or you more like the execution man?
So for many years, I was always the one taking the project from at Feed or at FID and being a part of living it, bringing it to life. And I would have said at that time that it was about creating something physical that wasn't there before. Certainly that was what drove me early on. But if I reflect back now, the part that is most exciting and is most rewarding, although I think the whole outcome is the real reward, is that bit where you're working with those really diverse minds, with that amazing experience to craft the future state, to understand it and to bring it to life in a non-physical way such that it can be translated for the various companies and individuals that will create the physical entity that you're after, the facilities. And that's really exciting. But then if I really reflect back, which I've been doing over the last few weeks and months, it's been really about the fact that I've been part of something much greater than myself, to be able to bring to life something that would not otherwise have happened if we hadn't been able to harness the collective, all the different skills and experiences and ways of looking at the world through the people. And so it doesn't matter which phase I'm in, they're all exciting. And what's the most exciting bit is being a part of bringing together the right fit of people, skills, experience, etc., contractors all over the world, and to create the environment for that to work and to work effectively and perform in a way that is not just turning a handle on something, on a process, but creating that additional value that comes from really understanding the process and applying it in an appropriate way in context of where we are and where we want to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I get it. Okay, that's so cool. And look, I can feel that for your projects, some of the projects you've been involved, they can be a real transformation for organizations. And that's, I get that, passion from you on that. And look, if you look at the statistics, and I've been sharing about that on LinkedIn for last couple of months, the current statistics are saying in project management, then on average, 1 in 2 projects fail. Okay, so they either don't meet the schedule or the cost or client requirements. And if you look at the mega projects in oil and gas, for example, the statistics goes as high as 70%. I just want to ask you, from your own experiences, what do you think are the biggest challenges in project management?
So having worked in the energy sector, not only in oil and gas, but also in coal-fired or thermal power, and also providing project services through my own company for a number of years to various organisations, small and not so small, in the utility business for pipelines and the like. One thing is common across all of those, and that commonality matches what my colleagues share with me from other industries such as IT, banking, etc. And that is that the projects that are successful are the ones that don't turn the handle on a process. They don't say, yeah, we know where we want to go. We've got the people with the experience and we'll go there. They're the ones that spend, some would argue, an inordinate amount of time, but certainly more time than you would want to spend potentially, but the right amount of time to stop and really understand what is it that makes success at the other end? What is the journey that we need to take to get there? And a very respected colleague that I learn a lot from, and from and who was a leader supporting me for many years, he often would ask us to think about it in the context of a Merlin approach, Merlin the magician, being able to move yourself into that final space and then look backwards and then start to build out what would be needed. And I like that idea because it helps you stop and pause. And at any point in time, as you're undertaking the studies, building out your body of knowledge that's needed to make the right decisions as you move along, what's occurring is that you're being able to stop and reflect and look at it in the context of the future state. And quite often that helps you to realize that, okay, in the context of the future state, as I'm starting to envisage that, I've got a gap in my knowledge, or there's a decision that I'm not sure has really landed in the context of the quilt of decisions that need to be made. And for me, it's really important to get right back at the start, understand where I am, what are the needs of the organization, the people, the business unit, whoever it is that's going to operate, maintain, create value, take to market product from what's being created. And this is where something that didn't come to me immediately in my career, but came along the way, is this focus on, I must understand the frame I'm working within. I must understand who are the stakeholders. I must understand their needs. I must understand the risks and the opportunities. And I must be able to understand them and talk about them in the context of where I am today and where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
If I can do that, it means that as the world changes around me, whether it be piracy in the Gulf of Aden or whatever might happen, or the market escalates so that what we thought something would cost initially is not what it will cost later, then we're aware of those things. We've actually understood the context today. We've understood what we think the context will look like tomorrow. And we remain agile then to make adjustment as we move forward based on what we think the context might be along the way. In a word, framing is a really important word. Framing is the word that we use to try and help all parties, particularly the main decision makers, understand, the main stakeholders and decision makers understand their role, what's needed from them, and ensuring that they have clarity about what is and what is not, what will be and what will not be. And I think that's an important part of setting up for success and being able to ride the journey that will be, not on a boat on a rapid with no control, but being able to ride the journey with a level of control that is born through understanding what I can control and what I cannot, what the team can control and the team cannot, and constantly watching for early signals, weak signals, strong signals, undertaking time to step back and posit what might be, so that then the future doesn't run away from us before we have the ability to adapt and refocus.
Mm-hmm. And this is really great. This is you've described a lot of what we call that happens during the opportunity framing workshops, right? And I was just a lot of the companies that I meet, in South Texas especially, they are very unfamiliar with what you just described. And I think people are also, a lot of the companies, a lot of the people are still unfamiliar with the concept of inviting facilitator to come in and actually create that experience and take teams through that journey so we can arrive with what we call a frame. So let me just ask you sort of like a very basic question. How would you sell facilitation to senior managers? Like, what are some of the key benefits that you think companies would experience by having a facilitated opportunity framing workshop?
Vona, one of the things that I think is most valuable to focus on here is any organisation is a unique set of circumstances, of people, of facilities. They have a community they work within and operate within. They have a customer base that they understand, or they may be aspiring to get into a new area of business that they're still starting to understand. But that organisation will have a significant amount of knowledge. They will have tacit knowledge that'll be spread all over the business. They will have organisational knowledge that will be embedded in process, procedures, guidance, those sorts of things. They will have knowledge from the past that hopefully they've been able to hold on to. And sometimes that will be stories that will have been modified over time. Sometimes that will be written documentation of what happened. And the knowledge within the organisation must be understood, I believe, before an organisation takes a path forward to create outcomes, to create value that will sustain and grow and improve the organisation. And where I stop is, if I'm talking to the person who's the head of the organisation, or who is the person responsible for the final outcome, it might be the business unit owner, I'm saying to them, what is it that you see as successful? And they will quite often look at that through the lens of what they know and what they've seen. And they will say, well, yeah, we've made some mistakes in the past, or we've had successes, and they'll be able to share those usually through their lens. But then I say, do you understand, and how do you understand the knowledge of the organisation in the context of the journey you would like to take? And quite often it's very hard to actually really honestly articulate that. And at the heart of framing is being able to stand back and say, I can honestly reflect the knowledge in the business today. I can honestly reflect the needs of the organisation. I can honestly describe the stakeholders involved and how they will be a part of the journey. And if I can do that, maybe I might say to them, well, are you so sure that that's perfect that you can just step and go? And I've not had anyone say that yet. So the next step is quite logically, well, this is where the art of framing and the art and science of framing comes in, because it allows us to, with the appropriate skilled facilitation, to bring all of those things into context today, play around with them, understand them, delve into the knowledge of the business to make sure that all the relevant knowledge, the good, the bad, the ugly and the brilliant, is all understood in context. And then you roll around in it. And this is not a major exercise. In some cases, this can be done in a day. In other cases, it can be done over a series of smaller focused workshops or focused sessions where you bring the parts together slowly and then talk about the whole, because it's quite often that when you dig in and ask those questions, not everything is there. The knowledge is not always at fingertips. The stakeholders are not always there. So I'm always encouraging, ask these questions, be honest in answering them, not just it'll be right this time, and then take the time to build out the frame. And it is an art and a science. And if it's facilitated well by a person who understands the context, the organisation, to some degree, and I'm not talking about necessarily someone from within, because sometimes someone from within is over invested and biased in their experiences that are strongest with them and the things that they see as most important. So the important thing is to have someone who can facilitate, who can help bring all of those parts together, but who are not invested in the outcome, and thus able to watch the various components, the people, the knowledge artifacts, as it were, that are coming together, and to help the individuals come together, interpret what they've got, and create a very strong frame that then, at its essence, is able to inform every single person that will be a part of the journey going forward.
Yeah. Yes, you described this very well. Thank you. And from my own little research, I can see, and speaking to different project managers, you see that still a lot of people don't really appreciate that first phase, that idea generation, when you're just doing that framing, when you're trying to understand the business context. And, most of the time I hear companies around where I live now, jumping to conclusions without understanding what we're trying to achieve and why. A lot of managers, project managers, feeling pressure to execute really fast. We've got those little loops. There are many lockdowns now internationally. I can see there is again rush to deliver, rush to execute, and not necessarily enough time spent on bringing those multidisciplinary teams together and having them engaged and having them to explore what are the different options, for this idea, to realize this idea and to achieve, good project outcomes at the end. So what are some of the challenges that you see, right now, apart from that mindset of let's keep it simple, let's just jump in and just execute as soon as possible? Is there anything else, like from your, you were that project manager hat at some point, and construction manager, functional manager, general manager hat at some point? What would you say from your experiences stops people from having that day away when they can reassess, review, and focus again on, well, hold on, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve here? That seems very simple concept, but it constantly seems like challenging to implement. What would you say about some challenges in implementing that simple process?
Ivona, before I touch on that question, the challenges, I'd like to just bring back to the comments that you have shared around the circumstances that you're seeing. And could I look at them in a slightly different way? Organisations in today's world are time poor in respect of, we always want to be faster to market, want to be able to replicate what's done before, and there is generally an understanding that the business knowledge is there and available and alive. And so I would argue that most of the companies that are saying, let's run fast, we know what we need to do and move on, they've actually done the framing. They've actually gone through the process, but it has not been structured in a way that really helps them understand the quality of the space that they start from. And so I'd like to put a positive lens at saying that all these companies have amazing individuals. They will have amazing knowledge bases. And I've yet to work with any company, and I've worked with many around the world, that I can't say, look, hang on, there's some pockets of excellence there, and the individuals that make up the organisation, the knowledge they carry, the experiences they have are amazing. They want to come in and do an amazing thing. They want to create something of value. They want to go home knowing that they've been of some use to themselves, to the organisation, and they've created something that wasn't there before, or they're a part of creating something that wasn't there before. I'm yet to find too many people that don't fit into that category. And so it's quite natural for us to have a bias to action, have a bias to rely upon what we've learned and what we know. And really where, I know this probably comes to the challenges, really what I think the biggest challenge is to have the ability as individuals and as leaders and as decision makers in organisations to stop and say, what do I know? How do I know that I know it? And how is that I know understood across the rest of the organisation? And how do I know that all the parts of the organisation have the same focus as I have? Because they will by nature have different focus. By nature, they will have different needs. The operating part of the organisation that needs to operate for a number of years at a unit cost that's competitive so that they can actually get people to buy and they can sustain a viable operation, and they can continue to have investors want to be a part of their journey. At the same time, I've got a fixed amount of capital, or capital has to be used wisely. And so from those different focus areas, there are different needs. And the challenge is to help the parts of a business understand, and the business unit understand it's their role to stop and pause and ask the business to come together and reflect. And this is the essence of framing, is that stop and pause. Where are we? What do we know? How do we put together what we have? What are we missing? What do we need? How will we clarify and create absolute clarity for all parties around how they interpret their needs with the overall outcome, and to step back. And the challenge is that our bias is to action, and our bias is to, we believe we know, we've been successful before, we'll be successful again. And I know I'm going over this again, but for me, how do we stop, pause, reflect, understand, regroup, move forward when the time is taken to do that? And yes, while it might be a single day where all of that comes together in a facilitated workshop, there's a huge amount of planning required. It might take many, many conversations. It might take an individual conversation with every stakeholder prior to that session. Or it might be that you've got an organisation where they're all willing to come and stop and listen, and really listen to the needs of others, so that they can then interpret and understand, in the context of others, their own space and their own biases, thoughts, feelings around where they are and where they want to go. Mm-hmm. Back to an earlier question you had, some of those things that cause problems in project delivery. I don't like the idea of failure. Failures are very few and far between. A failure is a term that we place when something didn't go the way we planned. But it is fairly rare that an opportunity doesn't end up getting completed and be a revenue stream for a company. There might have been more capital put in. It might have missed the original time frame. But I think failure is a poor word. It was not an efficient use of resources, and I'm talking about resources in the broadest sense. And it might not have been the outcome that was best for the shareholders, etc., and the investors. And so let's think about, how do we improve that, and how do we get more predictable outcomes? And I'm loath to use the word predictable, but outcomes that we can rely upon because we've understood them. And I keep coming back to the start. Mm-hmm. Framing. Mm-hmm. Understand where I am, where I'm not. Understand the broader needs of all stakeholders, and that always includes government, it always includes community, it always includes the community, the construction, the contracting community who will produce the equipment, who will provide the components, who will aggregate those and bring it to life, the people who will operate. Understand the needs of all of those, bring them together and create an environment where they can stop and reflect, build out of a clear understanding of where they are, understanding of the future state, and particularly, and this is the bit that we haven't touched on yet, but I think is one of the most important pieces, is understand the risks and opportunities that sit around us at any point in time. And as I talked about that Merlin concept of being in the future and looking back, a part of that is understanding, well, what's going to come at me? How are things going to change in the world? And we constantly see that. The world is changing in ways that we hadn't thought about before. The black swan events are becoming more prominent. But we can ride out and have a level of control through that journey if we understand where we're starting, we understand what we know and what we don't know. And this is the framing piece. And the challenges to this are my bias to action, my bias that helps me believe that I know more than I do, or that I can repeat the same thing over and over again and get a better outcome. It's human nature. As individuals, we have those ways of looking at the world, and as organisations, quite often we have our own organisational biases that can constrain us, but they can also be an advantage as well. And that's why I like to use the word knowledge. What's the organisational knowledge? What's the knowledge that sits within the various parts of the business and sits outside the business that we will need to bring in to take the journey? Because it's very rare that any one business will have, or one organisation will have everything they need within. And how well do I understand the needs of those others? How well do I understand the market? How well do I understand escalation? How do I understand the risks that are most critical? And how do I create a mindset? How do I create a mindset over the life of the project, starting with a deep understanding out of the framing, so that I'm able to, individuals and the teams, and the decision makers are able to be clear on where the present is and know what's happening in the present, and be constantly able to cycle through that step back. What am I seeing change in the world? How is that risk moving forward over time? How will that risk look and feel and be tomorrow, a month's time, 6 months' time? What are the risks that, or the activities that I haven't yet started, but I'll need to revisit and understand the risks and opportunities as we get closer, because the world has changed in the intervening period between when we first thought about them to as we move into the phase where they become real and present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is great. And I hear that it's almost like you say that in project management, it's really time to shift from heavily focusing on execution to that, focusing on framing at the start, early phases, understanding where you're at, understanding what are you trying to achieve and why. And then I hear what you're saying, from focusing on, deliverables, because we know every project manager want to produce deliverables or have the team to produce deliverables. So from focusing heavily on deliverables and activities, they are important, they have the place, but I suppose we need to also shift our focus, what you said, to create the team mindset, right? To really understand the decisions that need to be made, and then, how they're being distilled between decision makers, stakeholders, project manager, and then the team and everyone contributing. So you can see that just seemed to be a bit of a shift right now. And, many, probably 5-10 years ago, I would hardly hear project managers talking about mindset. And I think right now there's a lot more understanding and acknowledgement about, creating not just the vision for the project, but also vision for who do we need to become as a team? You know, who do we need to become as an organization as the result of that project, which will bring this transformation? Okay, so I think we've covered that really well. I've got a couple of questions for you to go into stage-gated process, phases and gates. You know, my favorite framework. It's an award-winning framework to bring ideas to life, and then from life to the actual execution. So look, I know you've been involved in project reviews, gate reviews, you understand stage-gated process, just really from your own experiences. What do you think are the top 3 benefits for an organization to have that, you know, process, again, which is, you know, scalable to projects or even initiatives? What do you think?
At the risk of overusing a way of describing the journey, how do we eat an elephant one bite at a time? How do we create the outcomes that we want in a project? One step at a time. We've spent quite a bit of time here this morning just talking about framing and talking about getting real clarity around where we start. That's great. And if we were to then, okay, let's run, we're off. And in that haste, as the world is moving, as we understand more, as the engineering's being completed, as we're starting to specify what we're going to require and get out into the market and find out that we can't get what we want or whatever, we can very easily end up with something that we didn't intend, that doesn't quite work the way it was meant to be, or it could be a fundamental flaw where it doesn't work at all, and that's happened. And unfortunately, I've been a part of journeys where that's happened. And so thus is born the need to step carefully through the journey and have those points where you stop and reflect and say, is what I know now, what we understand as an organisation, as a project team, does that match the needs of the business, as the business on all the stakeholders? And are we ready to move forward with what we've created at this point? And it might be in the early phases where we're undertaking a number of studies and collecting data from the field for maybe a large brownfield addition to an existing plant. Or it may be where we're acquiring land and looking at a completely new context and engaging with community. If we try and overlap too much of those things and run all together on the journey, then it's quite likely, and in my experience, very likely, that we will make decisions that will not be optimal. Now, if the most important thing is to get to the end and have something, we might only stop a couple of times along the way to check in and be prepared to operate with a greater level of risk and uncertainty. But if we're investing the farm, as it were, it's the term that we would use in Australia, if we're investing to a level where we could damage the organisation, we could damage the company, the term we use is we bet the farm, then we might want to stop more often to understand where are we going, do we still have a viable path forward? And this is where the idea of a stage gate comes in. And it's not where you stop today, step back and people come and crawl all over you and try and tell you what you already know or come and put their own view across what you've done. It's where, as you have done the framing, you've thought about the level of risk and uncertainty that you're prepared to work within. You've thought about the journey you wish to take, and you've thought about what you're going to need to do to build out the right decisions, to obtain the right information and data, etc., and to bring the right knowledge together and the right stakeholders together. And thus you will create a map. And many people call it a roadmap, but it's certainly a forward map where you say, okay, well, I probably should complete the ideation process and stop, or I should complete the concept and my understanding of the concept and pause. And again, not to just have people from outside of your activities come in and dump and tell you what you either already know or what you should have done because they've got a different lived experience. But during that framing session, put a plan together, a roadmap together that says, I probably need to stop 3 or 4 times or 2 times or 5 times or 1 time. And let's create a gate or a door where it could be open, but it might be closed. And think about what I need to verify and understand and overlook and oversight as I go along, so that I've had the appropriate review along the way. If it was a technical piece of work, a study that's been verified by an independent party or a verifying body maybe. And then as I get to the end, I bring the stakeholders, the key stakeholders and the key knowledge experts that have been the subject matter expert who were part of framing. You bring them together again, and ideally they take the journey with you, where you share with them what you've done, what you've learned, and what it looks like in the context of today, and how you've interpreted that against the value proposition that you're driving towards. And you ask them to help you test that. And it might be that you no longer have a viable path forward and you stop. And the value of that is you stop early before you've expended significant amounts of resources from the organisation. And then you have a problem later that you have to put more and more resources in to recover from. Or you have to stop very late and you do reputational damage as well as financial damage and damage to the efficient use of your resources. And so it becomes very, very valuable now to plan out those points in time where you stop, the gates, the doors that you want to walk through, and see, am I right? And as well as that, you might stop, and sometimes I've been a part of organisations where we do stop at those gates because there's not a viable path forward. The world's changed, the market's changed, whatever it might be. But also, it helps you understand any new risks and opportunities that are coming. It helps you understand that, okay, I have quite a good knowledge of all the components, but I don't understand this segment. It might be the market that you're going to go into is shifting more rapidly than you expected. And the market segment you're going to do is not there anymore, or it's changed. And okay, do we still have a viable way of getting into that particular market or not? It might be that you do, but you've got to shift slightly. I need some more, I need another stakeholder, I need some more knowledge, I need some more information, I need to understand in context what's been occurring. And so you then craft the plan for the next journey, the next pathway to that next gate, where you are starting to feel like to feel out what is different from that original plan. And so it's really, really valuable, in my opinion, to have more rather than less. One gate would be nice. I go to financial investment decision, yes or no. But if I have a few more pause points prior to that financial investment decision, then I might just get to financial investment decision with a better formed understanding of the journey we're going to take, better plans in place for the people who will execute the journey and bring it to life. And if I spend more time there, maybe I will have a more predictable outcome. I'll have a reliable outcome. I will be able to do what I said I'd do through that execution phase, and I'll be more prepared for the things that will come at me. But for stopping and pausing and understanding where I am at key decision points along the way, at these gated hold points where I pause and reflect and understand, but for taking a few more of those pauses, going through a few more of those gates, maybe I would have had a better outcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is really good. This is really good. And you can tell that now, we live in this world full of uncertainty, and you can see that role of those gates, which is, stop the projects with a poor value proposition as soon as possible. Don't let yourself invest too much money and resources in projects that are not necessarily going to take you somewhere, right? So you can see that the role of gates to be strong, so you can consciously make a decision. Okay, and I like what you just said. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be 4 gates and 5 phases, right? So I really like that when you say, make it relevant to your project, scale it as you need, have conversations with your team up to how many stop and checks you want to do on the way. Okay, so make it your own decision, and obviously get that confirmation approval from decision makers that you're going to have this amount of checks, and this is your roadmap. So this was very clear. Neil, thank you for that. I just want to ask you a question. So I'm just curious. Have you ever been in a situation, or you saw a situation where teams said, okay, we're going to have the next 4 weeks a gate review, right? We're going to have that stop. And then they bypass that stop and they don't have that, what do you think is the impact on the project, on them, and on the organization if we, and it does happen. For some reason, someone makes the decision, oh, let's just move to the next phase. Let's just not waste our time and energy. We've done our assurance reviews. Okay, let's just move it to the next phase. So what do you think is the impact of kind of like jumping over those gates without having that done at the start as part of framing,
Ivona, if the framing has been done well and we've understood the gates we need to go through and we've understood the level of risk and uncertainty we're prepared to operate within, then I would like to think, and I believe we do have the opportunity then to get the right number of pauses planned out in our roadmap. Nothing's perfect. The world can change. The world does change. And so there are times where we may say, well, look, we will go from the concept we've got, we'll go straight into our feed activities, our front-end engineering and design work. We'll go to market and get appropriate pricing. We will potentially put contracts in place. And that might be appropriate. That said, if during that framing we'd identified what is it that we expect to see at that gate, and how do we know that we have the right level of understanding, we've understood risk and can interpret it correctly, we've understood the space we're working within, and we've got clarity around the decisions that have been made and the quality of those decisions. And it might be that, and quite often I would argue that it's not, I think, a 4 weeks as you suggested. It's quite often, it might be a very short period of time. You could stop for a day or a few days, or you could step away from your daily activities just for a short period of time, because you have been assuring and verifying and understanding in the rhythm of the work that's being done. And so then the exercise that you're doing is to step back and say, here are all the components. Let's just put them back together the way we thought we would have them together during the framing and that initial planning mapping stage. And does it all make sense? And yet we know where we are. We understand that nothing's changed. It's all good. Or there's one change there. We've understood that. We've done the extra work to plan out how we would move forward. And it can be quite a rapid step back, pause, understand, move forward. It doesn't have to be this industry within where we interrupt the flow of the organisation, the flow of the project team as they move forward. Now, it might be that the decisions are so critical that we bet the farm then yes, we might want to stop and take some time to really reflect and dig around. But that's not always the case. Mm. And so if we are in a journey where we've worked out that no, we're betting the farm and we need to stop 3 or 4 times along the way, and that we think to really understand that we'll bring external expertise in to check, we'll undertake a series of overlay reviews around what's been done, then yes, that might be the belts and braces needed in that context. But that shouldn't be a default position, and I would argue that's a small percentage of the time. The majority of time, if the framing is done well, the mapping is done well, and the team have that mindset of understanding and constantly checking in on themselves around what they know, what they don't know, the risks, the uncertainty, and they're constantly checking on the quality of the small decisions that they're making, and understanding whether that quality is within the bounds of the journey that they're taking, managing risk and uncertainty, then this pause at a gate can be quite short. Mm-hmm. And it isn't about stepping in and doing that, what I call, and what I've seen in my experience, the dump on the team and tell them what they already know, or give them a view that is very much biased to the context of the people coming in to look. But it's about the team being in control of that pause, the team being in control of putting the right assurance verification activities in place in the rhythm of the project as the work is being done, and then being able to step back and describe to themselves and appropriate expertise around them from the organisation and those original stakeholders from the framing around what they know, what they don't. And then it becomes very, very clear on the go, no-go decision. And this is where you really then start to be able to say, am I ready to proceed? And then the business owner can say, do I want to proceed? And I think that's a really important piece that doesn't have to be a long stop and take away the momentum, take away the flow from the organisation. It might be something that is very much done in the rhythm, and the gate is a short pause where you bring everything together, stop and reflect, and move again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. This is so good, and I think I hear it happen in few questions and answers. That importance of framing that you've explained so well. If you could just, in my last question, just summarize briefly what makes a good frame, or even frame, and what makes a good framing workshop.
The fundamental that sits behind this is an organisation that trusts the resources they have. They trust the human resources, they trust the experience, they know where the experience is, and they trust their people to be able to reflect what they know and what they don't know. The piece for me that's most important is that the leadership of the organisation, the owners of the business entity in the organisation that are looking to achieve an outcome through a project, recognise that no one part of the business will know everything, that only a collective of the business and a mature business that understands what knowledge they hold within and what they don't, and is able to bring that together, then that organisation will naturally undertake a good frame, because the project leader who is responsible for bringing those parts of the organisation internally and externally together, those stakeholders to undertake a frame, will know that they're coming there as an individual or as a representative of a part of the organisation, the business. They know that they'll be coming there as an agent for the business, not as an agent only for their part of the business. They clearly come as a subject matter expert for their part of the business, but they come as a component of something that's larger than themselves, and they come ready to listen, and listen very, very carefully to the needs of the other parties. They come ready to compromise if necessary. They come ready to stand firm as necessary, but they come ready to have open dialogue around where we are, what we know, what we don't know, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, what's the context that we're in today, what's the context of tomorrow, and they understand how they will put a map together that will take them forward, because they understand what the journey will look like. And if they're missing a piece of the puzzle, they will go and find it. They will stop. Some of the best framing has taken more than once to get it done, because they realized as they were going through that they were missing a fundamental stakeholder, they were missing a fundamental piece of information or some knowledge that would potentially change the outcome. And so they pause, go and get that and regroup. Organizations that have the ability to know that they don't know everything and that they must stop and understand where they are in context, that they have a mindset of being comfortable to live with risk and uncertainty. They're able to describe what level of risk and uncertainty, that appetite that the organisation has at a corporate level, and then at a business unit level and a functional level. They understand the risk appetite that can be managed within the organisation, and they understand where they're placing that project within the context of the broader organisation. When they do that, what I've seen is people want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of they want to be an individual within something that's greater than themselves, to create something that's greater than themselves. And there's nothing more pleasurable than being a part of that. If an organisation gets it right, the vision, the excitement that's generated, the want of the organisation, the people in the organisation to come in and be a part of a journey to create something through delivery of a project is brought to life in that framing, and it's brought to life through the whole of the organisation's culture and mindset. To, we know what we do well, we understand where we don't, we understand where we best operate, and we're not afraid to put a hand up and say we don't know. We're not afraid to say, let's pause. We're not afraid to challenge each other constructively to make sure that we really are getting the best out of everything that we've brought together. It's just damn exciting. It is so much fun. It is such an exciting experience to be a part of a project journey, particularly when you're able to be a part of the framing and then to go out and lead teams, create teams and lead teams to deliver the final outcome. And it's just as exciting to be the project manager it is to be the construction manager or the quality manager or the subject matter expert boffin that might understand everything about the mid-ocean conditions that a vessel might have to go through to be able to install something on the seabed or to transfer something from a wharf to a quayside, to transit a module thousands of kilometres to where it needs to be, whatever it might be. Each individual will go home feeling that they've been living out part of that amazing journey, and at the end of it, they can say, I've met people, I've been a part of it, and I did that.
Wow, this is great, and I agree with you. There is nothing more exciting. It's as you watch the team, share one to another what's possible for them, or like you said, what do they know and what do they don't know, and challenge each other's thinking. And then at the end of the day, there is this, excitement, well, we call it alignment. There's this clarity, but there is this energy as well. So yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely bringing people together, getting them straight away engaged with what's possible right from the start. And I know that you've been a big fan of opportunity framing workshops, opportunity framing processes, and you've facilitated yourself, from what I know, those workshops. right in the early phases. You've been coming to my workshops as well, and you've met a lot of different framing facilitators as well, which has been absolutely amazing. Right, so the last question I have, Neil, is there anything else that you would like to be asked and you haven't been asked?
There's something that I'd like to share that I've been reflecting on that I think is most important, is that I have convinced myself, and I believe I've done that wisely, that the secret sauce, the essence of great projects, high-performing teams, is having an organisational culture where each individual is understood for what they bring, that they are allowed to bring what they have, their knowledge, their skills, in a way that works for them. They're encouraged to be a part of the whole. They're respected for the way that they will fit. They're encouraged to be courageous. They're encouraged to be reflective. They're encouraged to bring all of themselves to the table. And the leadership has worked out and has practiced how to make sure that all the different human components have been included appropriately and feel included in the journey. That starts at framing and it carries right the way through. It's not that I've got the best procedure. It's not that I've got the best set of deliverables. It's not that I've got necessarily the best, the highest quality decision. If I have a team that's been carefully constructed, carefully put together, the right skill sets, we know what we know what we don't know, we know where to find what we don't know, or we know how to go and find it. We respect each other in a way that is healthy, and by that I mean in a way that allows us to challenge each other constructively, allows us to have differences in viewpoint, in ways of looking at the world. It allows us to see each problem, each opportunity, each risk, each action, each set of activities from a context of a team, from a context of we. What is my role? What is my part to play? How will I be an effective team member? How will I be an effective member of the framing activity? How will I be an effective stakeholder? How will I be a part of creating a high-performing we? Great inclusive leaders create the environment where the best of what's in the organisation and what's brought in can be used. And when that's done right, high-quality framing leads to high-quality decisions, high-quality activities lead to high-quality decisions, high-quality decisions lead to high-quality understanding. High-quality understanding leads, given time, to high-quality plans. High-quality plans lead to high-quality outcomes. That said, teams that are inclusive, that trust each other, that know that they can be courageous and challenge, also then are constantly, chronically uneasy. They're curious and they're looking for what they haven't understood. They're looking for how that risk might materialize in a way that they hadn't thought about. That level of unease, that level of curiosity only comes when each individual feels a part of something that's bigger than themselves and they feel trusted and valued. And so we can have all of the gated processes and framing and procedures and things. None of that creates the value we really want to achieve without those leaders who understand how to build out an inclusive team and take the journey.
Right. This is Can't say anything else. You just spot on, and you're absolutely right. Opportunity framing could be possibly an enabler or stage-gated process. But again, it's a process. It needs to be handled well, be effective, and work for people. And you're right. If we have empowering leadership all across different functions and groups, there is a lot higher likelihood we can use those processes effectively, and we can get better in making decisions in relation to investing into the right projects and making the right decisions for the company. All right, Neil, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I hope, and I'll make sure that you come back to our conversation. We're going to make them regular. We want to have people coming with different experiences from all kinds of areas in relation to project management, project development, idea generation, and facilitation to share their insights and their views on what works and what doesn't, with the intention to help people so they can finally work together well and bring their ideas to life. So with that in mind, I'm just gonna stop recording.